The person that you are going to next hear, we are welcoming, and that is Ambassador Feret Hosia. And I think you know he's the new permanent representative of Albania in the United Nations, but as many of you, I think many of you will recall, he first served in this role from 2009 to 2015. Am I correct? I think. And as you'll also recall, he held the first major event. He designed it. He was in charge of it with B'nai B'rith International at the UN on Holocaust Remembrance Day about the unique role that Albanians played, Albanians in Albania and Kosovo, in saving every Jew who either was in Albania or made it to Albania during the Holocaust. No one else had ever accomplished what he accomplished there before, to bring it to the awareness of the United States.
Wonderful.
So we're very, very fortunate that he's returned as Albania's ambassador to the U.S. and at a time when also Albania is a member of the UN Security Council for the first time.
Isn't that wonderful?
So please welcome our very good friend, Ambassador Feret Hosia.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador, for coming.
Do you want to try?
Good afternoon to everyone. I have a statement. I will not read it. I will just say 4 things. The first one is how pleased I am to be part of this gathering to honor these 2 fantastic, wonderful, exceptional, as you are qualified, persons. It is a lifetime engagement by Joe and Shirley for the rights, for the dignity of Albanians everywhere in Kosovo, in North Macedonia, Macedonia at that time, North Macedonia today, in Preševo Valley, in Montenegro, and of course for the well-being, development, prosperity in Albania. So we have been lucky and blessed, and he has it on his name actually. God has protected you, DioGuardi. So we have been blessed to have such supporters who did not spare an effort, their time, their energy, their skills to go where power is. We ambassadors do a fantastic job, but it's not enough. And those 2 colleagues can testify. We need people who go where power is, to have that credible information, to give that information, that first-hand information, to those who decide. And without that, we would not have been in Kosovo or in Albania where we are. That was my first point. My second point is that your work not only is recognized by us, but reality has shown what has happened. So your efforts are not in vain. And Albanians everywhere, but I can speak about Albanians in Albania, will never, ever forget. Your work, activity, contribution, impact has to be recognized, will be recognized duly in Kosovo, I hope, but I can assure you, in Albania.
Thank you.
The third, I would like to say just, of course there are many problems, and the international recognition of Kosovo is not complete. It will come, because that's the only way. It's just one straight avenue. It's not easy, it has become complicated, but I was very happy to hear Senator Menendez committing, because it's complicated in Europe, but it can be sped up by the US. So if you continue your work, which I think you will continue, this is priority number 1. The US needs to get engaged seriously, to push Europeans and to get over with that issue with Serbia.
Yes.
Kosovo is an independent state. It has nothing to do with Serbia unless Kosovo decides to have relations, dealings in everything that states do with each other. We have to come there, because without that, the dossier of the Western Balkan 6 will not be completed. My last point is Albania's Security Council. I'm privileged and honored, and this is the honor of my life and my team, that for the first time Albania is serving where decisions are made, where the important issues are dealt with. And if I'm losing a little bit of voice today, I will be missing it tomorrow at the special meeting that we will have, and the clash we will have with Russia on Ukraine. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock there will be a meeting in the Security Council to expose Russia and to try to have Russia say that publicly that it will not attack. We don't know what's happening. They are preparing. But we will expose Russia tomorrow to say that Russia respects the territorial integrity and sovereignty of another state, and Albania will be very vocal on that together with the United States.
Thank you.
The Security Council has added for Albania not only a spotlight, not only responsibility, but it has added a layer, an important layer that we have not had in our fantastic, exceptional relations with the United States. I sit every day close to a member of the Biden's cabinet, Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield, and I talk with her every day on various issues. So whenever I need to tell her something, I have her close to me every day, and I'm speaking about this engagement of the United States for Kosovo because it's extremely important.
Wonderful.
Senator Menendez said that it was difficult, but they will have to do a little bit more. And I'm concluding by saying that every time you went to testify, every time you, like this one, gathered people, there have been so many occasions. Please accept one wholehearted thank and gratitude for every second that you spent for us.
Thank you. Let's give this wonderful diplomat, Albanian diplomat,
Yes.
a big hand for what he's going to do.
Now you see how fortunate we are. I forgot to add one thing. The senator mentioned that it would be the subcommittee on Europe that will be holding a hearing. Okay?
Senator Shaheen.
The first one is
Chairman.
going to actually happen at 10 in the morning on February 16th. I don't have my calendar in front of me. I think it's a Wednesday. When we get that message intact, you'll be able to hook up online and listen to it. And now Joe is going to introduce the creator of the book.
Well, let me give you a great story because, you know, many people have been exposed to the greatness of history when it comes to Albanian history. Now, you see the statue of George Castriati, is it still here? I put it as you walked in to see it. What happened to George Castriati? Don't bury him, please. Right there, okay. Very important that you know that 550 years ago, there was a great general that was a hostage. Well, he was taken as a hostage by the Sultan. At that time, I guess it was Murad. Was it Murad? I think it was. And then later came Mehmeti. But this man realized that he was really Albanian. And in a way, this is my story. Because I was raised in an Italian-American neighborhood where I had to distinguish myself. My mother was from Bari, she's Italian. And then my father comes from Italy, but he comes from one of the most famous Albanian-speaking villages, Kotundi Greci. Now, why is that the case? And it's in the book. Because it's the only village that history shows Skanderbeg actually put his feet in, because when he left, it wasn't, everybody likes to call it Calabria, but it was really Campania, which is just north of Calabria. It's just wonderful to have Fatan here because he found us, believe it or not. He was part of the refugee camp in Macedonia. His parents were there. They escaped, and Fatan then found his way to Texas, where he became a student. And then he calls me one day, 2002, to say, Joe, I'm reading all this stuff about your league, and now in Europe, for the youth of Europe, they have a forum in Prague, and I would like to represent the Albanian youth. I said, well, who are you? And he explained who he was, how he got there, and whatnot. I said, listen, I'm a certified public accountant. If you give me a budget and you explain why this is important for the Albanian people, for you to address the youth of Europe, and by the way, he has his background in math and in computers, he prepared a wonderful presentation. I guess it was with a PowerPoint. And the unbelievable thing is that we almost didn't do it. I had to raise the money. We don't sit on money in the Civic League. I have to call people. He wanted 1,800 bucks. We raised it for him. It included the airfare, the hotel. He goes to Prague. Long story short, he gets #1 out of 50 students that are scholars. He is scored, not by Albanians, but by the European professors as #1. Calls me back again the following year. Says, Joe, now it's in Brussels. And now it seems to be even more important because I'm reading what you and Shirley did to come up with this resolution with Tom Lantos and Henry Hyde, and I'd like to go there, and I'd like to present. And I said, if you tell me that you can make a presentation with that resolution, HR 24, for the future of Albania as an independent state, because don't forget, this is 2002, didn't become independent even in words until 2008. So he did that. And again, he scores #1. The only Albanian there from youth, he scores #1. So with that, I want to introduce you to our #1 scholar, Fatam Baslimi, who left there, who went to get his master's degree in Harvard, and we were pleased to help him do that, but it's really his work that did it. And then he became Dr. Baslimi from Alberta University, is it? Yep. In Edmonton. And you don't know what he went through to be here today, how many planes he had to switch, and he gets here just in time. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, so thank you everybody for being here. I don't think I need a mic. You can all hear me. I am going to spare you from a boring PowerPoint presentation and a long speech, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about why we're here today, and that's a book. And it's barely my book. It's the book that talks about what has been done just in the beginnings. It's only part 1 of a long history of what has happened with the Albanian American Civic League, with Joe, Shirley, and all of you that have supported them in this huge, important journey for the Albanian nation. All of you have a copy of it, so I'm going to point to some pages. I'm going to try to be as prompt and as short as possible to give you the bulk of it, to give you the gist of it, to give you what the key points are and why it is so important. Before I do that, I just want to really thank out of the bottom of my heart Joe and Shirley for the wonderful opportunity to be here with all of you today, for the amazing work they have done in over 3 decades to support the Albanian national cause, and most importantly to support Kosovo. I want to thank every member of the board of directors who have spared nothing to support and continue this mission. They came today from across the United States. Some drove, some flew. Some couldn't just make it because flights were canceled. The nor'easter that hit yesterday was a major issue. I barely made it myself here. We have some special guests here with us today. Professor Yusuf Bujovi from Kosovo, a historian, somebody who has done a wonderful job in telling the world the true history of the country. I want to also thank a very special person who's not here today, couldn't make it, Haki Dervishi, another board member who has supported this book and who has supported the work that I did for over 2.5 years in documenting what we see here today. We have distinguished guests today. We all are distinguished by the virtue of being here, let me say that. But I want to recognize Ambassador Hosia, who in my opinion is one of the most important diplomats we have in the Albanian world today. We have missed him in New York for a while. He was here before, had a different assignment for a while. He's returned. And he returns at a crucial time in the history of Albanian diplomacy to serve Albania and the Albanian nation as a representative in the Security Council for the first time in history of the Albanian state. Another equally important diplomat that just started in Washington, Ambassador Ilir Dogoli from Kosovo. He's just been here a few weeks, maybe a few months, I'm not sure. He has served the Republic of Kosovo in previous diplomatic assignments as ambassador in Brussels, if I'm not wrong, in Turkey after that, and now ends up in Washington. And his colleague from New York, Ambassador from Zimisufaj, who leads our mission in New York on behalf of the Republic of Kosovo. Thank you for being here. Milayan, thank you for being here. He has been a supporter of books by Bujovi, and together with Ramiz Tafila of Houston, they have made sure that we tell the story. Most importantly, though, I did this book, and I'm here today because, not because of us, but because of those who come after us. And I want to recognize my daughter, Fiona. Can you just stand up for a minute? She's just a teenager. She's turned 13. But I brought her with me so that this generation of young people understands how we came to be where we are today, and then they hopefully take on the torch as we pass on. And nobody's going to live forever. So we got to make sure that we document as much as we can so that those who come after us know what has happened. With that, I'm going to start with my little presentation. Again, I'm going to spare you from a PowerPoint, although we kind of set up for that, but I want it to be more interactive, and I want you guys all have a copy of the book. So here is the key points that I say that have really kind of gotten me to think, although I've been with Joe and Shirley and Civic League exactly two decades now. But as I was looking at the materials that I got from Joe and Shirley and the archives, congressional documents, resolutions, letters, all of that, some of which are published here for the first time, I kind of relived that entire history. I was not part of any of this in the 80s and 90s. I was just a little kid. So for me, it was enriching in many ways. Beyond enriching, it was inspirational. And this is, as I said, just the beginning. It all starts in 1984, when Joe gets elected to Congress against all odds. Nobody expected him to win. He did win. His win was not only for his political ambitions and his own political agenda. I think his win was way more important for the Albanian nation. Things would have not happened the way they have happened without that win of that election in 1984.
Thank you.
Beyond that, a lot of people would, kind of ask the question, well, how did it happen that he then became so involved with the Albanian issues? Well, Joe talked about that, and everybody else who spoke before me talked about that, so I'm not going to repeat any of that. We know the story, how he got involved. But if you turn to page 39 of the book, you have the first ever congressional resolution that was introduced in the United States Congress on June 17, 1986. It was signed by only one member of Congress in the House of Representatives, Joe DioGuardi, and his friend in the U.S. Senate, Senator and former presidential candidate, Bob Dole, who recently passed away. A lot of people talk about history, but a lot of people have not shown you the facts. On page 45, you had a letter signed by Dole, addressed to Joe, thanking him for the introduction that he made to Dole and the bringing of Dole into the Albanian world and the Albanian issues. Key point, number one. There's three key points I want to make, and I'll be done with this. So number one, 1986, first ever resolution. Just about a year later, exactly July 15, 1987, you have the resolution on page 67 of the book. It took a year for Joe to garner the support of not another 5 members, not another 2 members, not another 10 members, not another 20 members, not another 40 members, not another 50 members. 58 members of Congress signed on to that resolution. Now I have all the names documented here. Just a year after the first resolution, Joe manages to get 58 members of Congress to sign on a resolution condemning Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia was a big shot at that time. Kosovo was nowhere to be found, not even on the maps. The first movement legally as a national movement for democracy and freedom and independence in Kosovo started with LDK in 1989, way after all of this was happening. So 58 members of Congress signed their resolution a year later. This is crucial because this is when we broke the ice. This is crucial because this is when the world started to understand through the American Congress that there is some people that are freedom-loving, that are on their historical and ancestral lands, and that are being butchered left and right by the regime of Milosevic at that time. On page 85, and if you have the book, you can just follow along because this is very important for you to just get the bulk of it. is the document, the United States Department of State document. It's reproduced. I didn't write it. I copied the actual document, placed it on the book. Well, here's what the document, among other things, says. This says that what Joe was doing, pretty much, and the resolutions he was introducing in Congress, were not seen in any way, shape, or form with a favorable eye by the American administration. In the 1980s, late 1980s, America wanted peace at all costs in that region. It was not ready to go to war or do anything about Albanians. Anyone, but much less Albanians. Indeed, I quote that document. You have it on page 87. It says that what Joe was doing, pretty much, was needlessly damaging the relationship that the United States had with Yugoslavia. Needlessly damaging. Well, that was not damage. That was rationally, reasonably, and bravely damaging the reputation of what then became known a few years later as the new Hitler of Europe, Milosevic, who caused deaths of millions of people, were the worst in Yugoslavia, Bosnia, and Kosovo. These resolutions were key because in November 1987, we managed to have the first ever hearing in the Human Rights Caucus of the United States Congress. 1987. For the young people I see here, they were probably not even born. I was only 3 years old at that time. So when the United States Congress was speaking about my rights, I had no idea about anything in the world. I was only 3 years old. This was the first time that officially we were talking about what was going on in Kosovo at that time. That brings me to the point number 2, which is absolutely in my mind significant and important. And you have that in page 109. In page 109, you have a letter by President George H.W. Bush, the late president now, George H.W. Bush, written and signed by him, addressed to Joe DioGuardi, in which he talks, last paragraph if you read it, it says, we're not going to stop at anything to make sure that the Albanian people in Kosovo get their human, political, and civil rights. Now, for those of you who have studied political science, for those of you who have studied history, you have come across the famous expression of what's known as the Christmas warning. Well, that became, a couple of years later, an important statement, because it was the Christmas warning that sent a message to Belgrade from Washington that God prohibit you go at a full war attack on Kosovo, the United States will respond. I ask any scholar, any student of political science, to find yet another document that shows and documents the roots of the Christmas warning as they are documented in this letter from September 27, 1988. That's the roots of the Christmas warning. That's because of Joe's personal, at that time, friendship with President Bush's wife, who came from the same area that Joe that lived in Rye, New York, if I'm not mistaken, Barbara Bush.
Barbara Bush even campaigned with me.
You have pictures and handwritten notes by President Bush to Joe that I included as sample. You know, the book only contains 5% of the material in this time period. If I included everything, the book would have had to be 5 pounds. We could not have carried it. This is the second most important point, because now what's happening? Remember the State Department being against, only people in Congress wanting to support us. Things are starting to change. Now we have somebody in the White House who's concerned. And that happened because of the work that Joe did at that time. I'll move on to the next major point. Page 125. I have included the minutes, the original minutes of the meeting on the founding of the Albanian American Civic League. Even the Civic League comes after what Joe had started to do for the Albanian people and the Albanian nation in the United States Congress. Only 6 days later, this happened April 1, 1990, Joe was talking to the editorial board of the New York Times. And just a few pages later, you have the article that came in the New York Times, dated April 6, 1990, that talks about the Albanians in Kosovo and Yugoslavia at that time. The bullying in the it's titled "Bullying in the Balkans," and then Joe's letter to the editor about that on that day. I'll move on to the third most important and crucial, I would say, moment that for me is on this book, and you'll see that in page 204, a letter to Joe by then Senator Joe Biden, now President of the United States of America, dated February 8, 1991. He was then chair of the Subcommittee on European Affairs in the Committee of Foreign Affairs of the United States Senate. In that letter, Biden is inviting Joe to testify in the first hearing that committee was holding on Kosovo. It is then, and the video of that hearing is on our YouTube channel at the AACL, that Biden was educated on the history and the importance of Albanians in the Balkans and what the Albanians actually needed at that time. Then I go on to talk about the work that was amazing that Joe and the Albanian American Civic League did between 1990 and 1993 to not only address the United States Congress and the administration here, but to bring attention to the Albanian issues in Kosovo throughout Europe. You have letters in the book, pages 217 to 222, of important congressional leaders like Bob Dole, Senator Powell, and others who were chairs of committees on foreign affairs, whether in the U.S. House of Representatives or in the Senate, and they were writing letters to Lord Carrington, to the prime ministers of foreign ministers of important countries in Europe, Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, France, you name it, and asking them to put pressure on Serbia about the Albanians in Kosovo. Yes, we all know what has happened after that, but I ended with the book in 1993 for a very good reason. As is written in the epilogue that Shirley Cloyes DioGuardi produced and wrote, 1994 she joined the Civic League. A few years later she married Joe. But ever since she joined the Civic League, I think a lot of the work and the success that happened after 1994 is connected to, is a result of the work that Shirley did with Joe together and the rest of the support. So Shirley, we would not be here without what you have done. And this is, as I said, just the first. And the second book, which is going to cover the period 94 to 2008, you will see a lot of the work that Shirley had done, without which we would not be where we are today. And that was stated by Senator Menendez himself. Now, what was interesting about his speech, and I'm going to conclude there, is that we have the most powerful man in the United States Senate, the guy who chairs the Foreign Affairs Committee, taking time to come to us today en route to the White House with, to meet with President Biden today on important global issues such as that of Ukraine. You know, just the fact that we had a man in this room talking about us, talking about our issues and our mission, and moving from here, going from here to DC, to be with the president of the most powerful country on the face of the earth, to talk about other things, is on its own historic. We would have never been able to get Kosovo free and independent without such work, without Joe and Shirley in the Civic League and people who supported them in the Civic League. Getting to know and getting the support of these key congressional leaders. We have to do that today. This is not just history. This is who we are. This is the story that gave birth to a new country called Kosovo. This is a story that helped the Albanians in Macedonia get the University of Tatova. Joe and Shirley were right there with the Albanians in Macedonia to push for that. This is a story that tells the history of the first ever congressional delegation visiting the Albanian lands in Montenegro. This is a story that talks about, and Senator Menendez mentioned that, the plight of the Albanians in the Preševa Valley.
Yes.
The most, you know, in my mind, the most important piece of the puzzle of the Albanian national cause. Now, who talks about Preševa Valley? Almost no one. You have the #1 person in the U.S. Senate talking about it. Why? Because he's been educated on it. He's been told about it. We've gotten his support on it. So this is who we are. Not the book, the history contained in it. And I have very little to do with it in terms of, if you take all of my writing about this book, you could probably condense it into maybe 30 pages out of the 300 pages. The rest of it is documents and documents and documents. Because only by telling the truth based on facts, we can build the true, actual story of our history. The rest is just cheap talk. With that, again, thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. I have had the honor of my life to work with these two people who I consider family, to work with these two people and the board. Again, I see Zikri, Hafiz, I don't, you know, the Lita.
Everyone stand up.
Everybody who's on the
Ekran.
board and who has supported us, the guy, Nazim, Yanuzi from Atlantic City, Sab Gosh, you know, everybody. Marash, I see you there. Without any further ado, from the bottom of my heart, faleminderit shumë.
Thank you.
Zot ju bekoft juve, familjet e juve.
Thank you for coming, all of you. Shirley, you have...
Thank you. And thank you to Fatah Bislimi. I think he really
That was wonderful,
deserves
Fatah.
a major please. The work that he did, and the presentation that we received.